Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. Rest day for the riders, no rest for the wicked, aka me and Benji Naesen here. The rat thing is fully decked out today and yesterday. This rest day recap, is supported by our show partner, Lacole, who produce performance cycling apparel. You can see their discount code, or our discount code for them down below. We've got a jam-packed recap. We've got an interview with Zwift Academy winner turned now beating Bernal on Lagunas to Naya mountaintop finishes at Burgos. Jay Vine, the young Australian, caught up with him. He had to leave the hotel to get better Wi-Fi on the bus. So that's at the end. We've got timestamps if you're listening on YouTube. A really interesting interview, talks tactics and even some insight into what happened in that big, strong Stage 7 breakaway. We're going to recap the winners of each stage, preview the next second week to come, the next 5 or 6 stages. Let's get into it, Benji. Well, first of all, what are you doing today? What do you do on a Monday?
So I'm basically at work, and this is my lunch break.
Well, on that note, if you feel sorry for Benji, which I don't, but if you do, you can help us out a lot by giving us a review or a rating on podcast players, particularly on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, really. You can like the YouTube video or subscribe to the YouTube channel if that's where you listen, because a lot of extra work goes into those videos. Or we have a Ko-Fi link where you can tip us a coffee. Or there's a super thanks, which Benji reminded me exists on YouTube, where you can tip us with a comment. But yeah, liking and sharing with your friends is the most helpful. But Benji, first week, Roglic won first stage prologue, Philipsen first sprint, Tarame, Picon Blanco with not too much GC action really, Jakobsen the second sprint on stage 4, Philipsen the sprint after that, Magnus caught one of the most exciting wins on Montaña de Collera on that 2K 8% climb. Roglic looking pretty good. Then the Stora DSM dominant win on stage 7. No GC gaps again. Stage 8, Jakobsen really dominating win. Then stage 9, the Damiano Caruso 70K solo with the most GC action except for the prologue, I guess. Which stage stands out for you the most out of the first week?
I think stage 7 was the one I enjoyed the most personally. I enjoyed the tactics that played into people trying to get in the breakaway itself, trying to fight each other. We've got the soap with Sivakov and Storer that stays in my mind and so forth. And in general, it didn't have the craziest gaps. I think that's the story of this entire first week. It's not like we have 10-minute gaps like in the Tour, but the Tour was a bit of an exception. But I think that the story is mainly that some people have lost the Grand Tour here and not necessarily have won it. So, for example, Carapaz, we now know that he's not in the form of the Tour de France nor the Olympics, and that it's unlikely that he's going to end up on the podium of this Grand Tour, for example. And the same for Vlasov and Landa, that are showing clear cracks in their fighting story here. And there's a few riders that we expected more of. There's a few riders that are overperforming, and that is the enjoyable part about this first week, is that nothing is decided. We do have an indicator of who is the strongest rider in the race, but that can still change over the course of the next 2 weeks.
Here's the revised GC standings that Benji was alluding to. Roglic leading 28 seconds ahead of Mas, 121 ahead of Lopez, so it is a decent gap out to third. Then Haig in fourth on 142, 10 seconds ahead of Bernal on 152, who is 15 seconds ahead of Adam Yates, his teammate, on sixth at 207. Ciccone is actually hanging quite tight, 239 in 7th, Koos 240 in 8th, Großschartner at 325, De La Cruz at 355 in 10th, the same time as Vlasov. Gino Mader at 4 minutes, Louis Meintjes, who I said we talked about yesterday, he's doing a very, very good job. 13th on 405. I think he can sneak a top 10 here. Aru on 436. Then Landa all the way down at 5 minutes and 47, pretty much out of the GC picture. So that brings me to tactics, Benji, and I want to talk about INEOS first. Do you think here's how a multi-leader strategy works on a final mountain in theory. One rider attacks, the leader Roglic has to close, and then the other leader gets to sit in the draft if they're on Roglic and gets brought back. Here's the problem with that. Roglic has a 30-second snap that is... It doesn't work because no one can stay on his wheel when his snap closes. We saw Mas try to hang it. He's like, nope, and rode his own pace. The second problem with that is you can't do it when he still has teammates, and they did that yesterday when he had Kruijswijk and Koos. So, but the main problem is it's difficult to do with Roglic. Where do you see the way for INEOS to put pressure on Roglic, Benji? Is waiting for the final climb even realistic? Or is it crosswinds again, which they've been trying? Or do they just have to hope he cracks one day?
I think they have a problem at their hands because it's a big challenge for them to find a strategy that works against Roglic and his team right now. In the first week, we fought Jumbo okay. They don't seem like the strongest in the first few mountain stages, but they held on quite nicely on stage 7 and 9. On 9, perhaps the strongest of the two stages. And I've got the feeling that they're certainly growing into some kind of form and that is offering up a bit of a counter portrayal against the fact that other teams might try and go early on stages. So, for example, in INEOS, if they go early with one of their riders in a stage, Jumbo seems to be able to control something like that at the moment. And that is an issue with that strategy and those strategies. And next to that, the fact that Movistar is also sitting on 2 and 3, they're going to play defensively against everybody that is fighting against that podium spot. So if INEOS, for example, decides to put Carapaz in a breakaway, well, Carapaz in a breakaway means that Movistar will pace. But in this specific situation, I mean that Movistar will probably end up doing something because they want to save their podium spot. Now, with Carapaz, they probably wouldn't care anymore because he's like 11 minutes behind.
Yeah.
But when we're looking at a Yates and a Bernal, they're going to respond to that as well. Perhaps they might try and they probably won't say to Roglic, you can close it. That's a bit on Movistar-like, despite their strategy in the first week being relatively good overall. Now, looking at the next 2 weeks for INEOS, week 2, we have perhaps 2 hilly stages, and for the rest, it's not extreme climbing stage. I think stage 14 is the one where climbing starts again, and that is in roughly 6 days. So if Bernal can get into a decent form in 6 days, that can relatively stay with Roglic in certain points, then the strategy of Yates attacking Ensefov might play a role, but it's unlikely that that will happen. I've got the feeling that INEOS's problem is mainly that their leaders are not good enough, and they're not good enough compared to Roglic. The difference is so obvious that
I don't think it's as big as we think. I think Yates' shape is good.
I don't think the problem with Yates for me is that I don't trust his third week. The only Grand Tour where Yates has been able to hang on in the third week was 2016 Tour de France, where nobody attacked except for Bardet on one of the mountain stages. So I swear if shit goes down in week 3, I don't trust Yates. And perhaps that's a me problem. Perhaps at INEOS that completely changed and he's a reborn person and he's the messiah that will bring INEOS to a podium here. But right now, I don't have INEOS in the top 2 teams to take a podium right now.
Adam Yates has spent a lot of energy to be on 2 minutes 07 at the first rest day. Picon Blanco attacks into the headwind multiple times. Marc Boudin closes him, gets nothing. On the crosswind stage into Montaña de Collera, when INEOS split it, he was at the back, that's where he rides. That's his fault. And I think he got gapped a bit. That cost him. He lost, I think, then 20 seconds, and they hard-paced at the bottom. So INEOS, in my view, cost Yates time there. I think on stage 7, on the Balcon de Alicante stage, he just sort of paced the group in didn't really do anything, just paced them in. I was like, okay, fair enough. Then yesterday, he does these meme attacks with Roglic having 2 teammates. Like, sorry, you're not going to put Roglic under pressure with 3Ks into a climb.
Exactly.
Like, you're not. So I think he's actually in good shape. I just think that he's cost himself a lot.
Do you think that INEOS going so hard to win this race is reducing their chance of getting on the podium? Because I've got the feeling that is the case, while Movistar is less trying to go for the victory and more going for the podium.
I disagree that Movistar aren't going for the victory. They attacked with Valverde halfway through a stage, trying to bring out Jumbo-Visma. I think Movistar made INEOS attack with Yates yesterday. They allowed him to, and then they countered with Mas. Enric Mas, sorry, if you believe that Enric Mas would have dropped Adam Yates head-to-head on the climb yesterday if Yates rode conservatively, I don't know what to say to you. Yates attacked 3 times, starting with 10Ks to go. Mas is in the wheels, all climb riding steady. Lopez is bridging him up. Lopez on a very good level, bridging him back to things. Mas, perfect timing, sees Yates has done his 3rd attack, hits it. So So Haig rode the opposite to Yates. Haig rode, you look at his power, his normalized compared to his average, very steady on this climb, opposite to Kuss. So I think the problem, Benji, is they've been riding as if Bernal is top-level Bernal. And if I want to do a little bit of back analysis, if I look at the interview yesterday, the way he entered that seat, he winced. I had it in the video yesterday. He comes, sits down, a bit of a wince. And I know as someone broke my back, and the people were saying he didn't get out of the saddle once on that climb yesterday. Didn't get out of the saddle once. I know when I was recovering from my back fracture, I could ride 3 hours in the saddle, but if you hit one bump or if you try to get out of the saddle and accelerate, that can twinge it and be a problem. So maybe we're on Bernal backwatch. But yeah, any last thoughts on INEOS before we talk about Movistar, Benji?
No, I think they've got a rough challenge ahead of them, and I think that I don't trust the Yates for the third week. I don't trust Bernal for the third week. And if we can't trust both of their leaders for the third week, then they have a problem for the third week.
Mercenary Carapaz.
In the second week, it's unlikely that they will lose huge gaps of time. So they've got a few days to figure out a strategy against Roglic. But perhaps the option is in the second week, where an opportunity for an echelon, like you said, might be the option, because that is where something might play a role. Because we've seen 3 times already where in the final kilometers before sprints and so forth, positioning of Roglic is not ideal. One time where it was good. Yeah, he's nearly crashed twice. That's true. And that might cost Roglic at a certain point, and that might come into play. We don't hope that someone at the top of GC crashes out and stuff, but if their position is 75% into the peloton with 5K to go and they are caught up by a crash, then it's kind of their own fault at that point. Now, I think that echelons and potentially something in the last 5 kilometers happening are the likely weakness of Roglic in the second week. But I've got the feeling that there's other teams that are having more trouble with echelons than Roglic. For example, a Ciccone, who has been called out by echelons already this week. Now, he's obviously not the epitome of a podium candidate here yet. I haven't seen that yet, but he's still hanging on to 7, for example. So he's definitely performing relatively well for what a lot of people expected from him. When it comes to INEOS, I think that they have to try with echelons, and they will have to try and keep Bernal and Yates safe for a week and hope that in the third week they can figure out a viable strategy of beating Roglic. But I even have a hard time to figure out what they could do in week 3, because Roglic at current form will be almost impossible to beat for them unless something happens.
And it's not even just Roglic. There's the elephant in the room, Movistar. And before we get into the winners, I think, of this first week, being Jumbo-Visma and Movistar, a note on our show partner, Le Col. They produce performance cycling apparel. If you're interested, if you've got a club or a group of friends anywhere around the world and you want custom kit, Le Col have been producing custom kit sustainably for a few years now. It's the same material produced that they provide for Drops Le Col, women's professional team. You want to check it out, it's at www.locol.cc. There's also a sale at the moment. If you want to use our code LRVuelta20, that's LRVuelta20, all caps, you can pick up Le Col kit with some outrageous discounts, which applies on top of already discounted items at 20% off. So thanks to Le Col for supporting the podcast. But the winners of the first week, Benji, Roglic didn't crash. Roglic is leading GC by 30 seconds on Mars. Kuss is even at 240. Jumbo-Visma got to be pretty happy. I don't think we need to analyze it too much. It's just, they rode pretty smart, no real issues. I want to talk about Movistar. They're the ones in the prime position if Roglic has an issue, not INEOS. They're at second and third. They've got the strong rouleur team, although they lost Jacobs. I think Movistar are pretty well poised, Benji, despite the loss of Valverde. They've got Verona looking good. Do you think they're going to be content with the podium? Because I don't think they are. I think they're going to get pretty hungry for the win, actually, and try and put pressure on Roglic if they can.
I think Mars himself wants to win this race. I think that Lopez seems to be the more offensive candidate. In the same way that we've got Bernal and Yates, we have Mars and Lopez for me. Lopez is the more offensive candidate that attacks more in the stages, while Mars usually sits on a bit more unless he sees an opportunity like yesterday and tries to use that to gain more time when it's clear that he can make that move without too much risk. And I have the feeling that, again, in the next week, it's unlikely that they can make a big move. But once the mountain start in week 3, they've got options. Verona, indeed, as a satellite rider, but they didn't indeed lose 2 of their riders so far. And that might cost them when it comes to strategies. But I've got the feeling that their team here is still strong enough to try something on those stages. Now, will they try and do something very risky and go pretty far out with Lopez? I find that extremely hard to believe, except for like a second last climb, where the last climb is not as huge, for example. But we don't actually have that too much in this race if you look at the third week. So the next mountain stage, for example, is that stage 14 where we've got Pico Viercas as the final climb. I think it's roughly 15k of climbing, and there's basically that very steep section in the middle of the stage, then a valley with rough rolling terrain, and then it's the last climb. I don't see Lopez attacking on a stage like that personally, so I'd be looking more at a stage 15 where he could do that on the what is it, Puerto de Mijares or something? Yes, that second last climb, because the last climb is a shorter one, and that offers more of an opportunity to go on the second last climb. I think that stage 15 might be a pretty crazy stage, and I'd love to see Lopez attack on that second last climb, for example, with Verona being in the breakaway to help him out in the small valley afterwards.
You stole my idea. It was perfect for Verona move. All right, let's preview week 2. I think Bahrain will also be pretty happy with Haig being up there, although it's funny how Benji, it can feel like a disaster. You know, I listened to their DS speaking after this stage. Oh, well, Landa's out of GC. It's like, well, sorry, but Landa probably wouldn't have been at like 120 on GC or 150 or wherever Haig is 140. So like you're in a better position. It's just because the name has changed. They seem to be depressed about it. I was like, don't worry about it. Anyway, stage 11. I think this might not be break Benji. If I'm quick step, I want to give Baggioli a chance. Bike Exchange, Matthews, this is the one for Matthews. If he's looking as good as he did the other day, I loved it. Magnus Corp probably try and get in the break though. But yeah, I think Quick Step and Bike Exchange should pace. And I think Jumbo Visma should lend a hand and give them a rider to control it, because I think Roglic on this final ramp, it's about a 800-meter punch. It's rolly all day. There's no real extended climbs except for some bonus seconds, 9Ks at 5% beforehand. If I'm Roglic, I want to take a little bit more time and put pressure on Bernal, test out Bernal on the explosive sections where him and Yates haven't looked as good. Even Mas, career-wise, hasn't been as good on these explosive sections. Or Benji, you think this is going to be break and I'm digging up a nothing stage?
We're talking about stage 11, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's going to be a break. Like, I believe that you're right about Bajoli. He can definitely do well on a stage like this, and he could potentially even win a stage like this from the peloton. But is the Koenig not just going to put him in the breakaway because he's far behind?
True. I don't know. It depends who goes. If it's a Spanish meme break, then no.
Well, I think on this stage, I feel like it's going to be more than a Spanish meme break personally. True. And a rider that I'd see going in a break like on a stage like this, for example, is Cristiano Dijking. But the problem with him is that he's actually relatively close in GC on 19th. So he's been actually holding on quite well.
Why?
And I think that 19th is not an issue, because being in 19th will still allow you to go in the breakaway. And let's say he gets in a breakaway like this and he gains 6 minutes, then he's in the top 10. Now, in week 3, I don't think Eiking is going to keep that unless he keeps going in the breakaways. And that's how Bernsteiner did it. His top 10 in the Vuelta in previous years. That's how Eiking could do it. So perhaps stuff like that is quite intriguing. And I think Meintjes can do the same, because while he's 13th, nobody will care if Meintjes is in the breakaway from the likes of a Movistar or a Jumbo, for example. And I doubt Gino Mader is going to start pacing in the peloton when he sees Meintjes in the breakaway. So I think Monty could accidentally end up in the top 10 just by being in breakaways every time around, but I completely went off what we were talking about. Stage 11, I think, is going to be a breakaway personally. When it comes to Jumbo, sure, they could put Hofstede or something at the front of the peloton and start pacing a bit with other teams that might be interested, like in Matthews, for example. But why wouldn't Matthews just not go in the breakaway? Like, and why would Hofstede do that while Jumbo, for example, they could just as well not spend energy that day and keep it for week 3.
True. I kind of agree. Now, you've convinced me that, Matthews should go on a break with Court and the likes of that. Stage 12, 175 Ks long. This is, again, Matthews type stage. We have two climbs that are pretty shallow gradient. It's 175 Ks long, 5 Ks, 7% descent, and then another climb of 7 Ks at 5.6%, although there's a 2K, 9.5% section descent, and then a valley of about 10 Ks, flat sprint finish. This is the nailed-on bike exchange have to try for Matthews stage, reeling in a break. But again, I'd expect Magnus
Or in the break.
Yeah, it's almost easier.
It's difficult, huh?
Well, I think the Tour de France showed that if he's in the break, he on his own, he gets played out. The other riders will not ride with him. So it's almost better to have the big team behind controlling, to be honest. But this reminds me of the Catalonia stage 1 stage a lot. But yeah, I think Court in the break, again, will be very dangerous there. I don't expect any GC action at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this is a breakaway stage once again. Can they not just play 2 cards and, for example, put a Schultz in the breakaway
Standard.
and keep Matthews in the peloton, or Standard in the breakaway? Yes, stuff like that. But this reminds me of that stage that who won it? Where Godot was in the breakaway and Aramburu, and was it Woods?
Are you talking
Tour de France this year?
Colbrelli with Conrad.
Yeah, Conrad won that. Yes, this reminds me of that kind of stage. I don't expect too much GC-wise, and they honestly shouldn't, to be honest. Like, there's a steep section on the last climb, but the valley afterwards is a bit too long to go on an attack on that climb and stay away, unless you've got someone in the breakaway. But who's going to try something on this stage if you know that mountains are coming in the week after? So I doubt it.
And Astana have to try here. I mean, this reminds me a lot of the stage I was thinking of, is the Vuelta stage Woods won last year, yes, where Woods was in a break with Bala and I think Fraile Benji. It had 2 climbs like this, and then it had a longer flat afterwards. They have to have Aramburu, Fraile, Luis Leon Sanchez, who was in the later, the Fuga de Fuga in that Catalonia stage 1 this year. So Astana have to get multiple riders in this breakaway, and DSM will too. I think nailed on break day. Stage 13, the only sprint stage of the week. It's got a little uphill drag, 204 Ks long. Quickly, Benji, we both agree Fabio is the quickest man here, and it really depends on if Jasper can get a really good lead out is the only way to beat him. Yeah,
certainly, and it's going to be between the two, most likely. I do give Demar the benefit of the doubt when it comes to he sprinted well on that one stage, but his positioning issue is a real problem, and it basically makes him not competitive on the majority of the sprint stages because he's not in the position to start sprinting off at the when the sprint starts, and that is both a lead-out problem but also a Demar problem because he's not strong enough to make his way himself, and Jakobsen can do that, and Philipsen has been relatively able to do that a tiny bit as well. So for me, it's Philipsen or Jakobsen, and I think that it's more likely that Jakobsen takes it because I feel like the Koenig train is getting tiny bit by tiny bit better throughout this Grand Tour, figuring out how to work together a bit more. While on the last stage that Jakobsen won dominantly, sure, Jakobsen was not on the train, but the train itself did perform very well. If Jakobsen was in full wheel there in the Koenig train, then that was a perfect lead out. So yeah, I think that I'm going for Jakobsen on stage like this, but we're going for picks, but we already did this, I think, at some point.
Well, Guarnieri's gone. So Demar's last lead-up man, DNF yesterday. I don't know if he crashed. I hope he didn't. But something not quite right at FDJ right now. Because, he's been doing pretty good lead-out sometimes, and Demar hasn't been performing. Stage 14 is the only mountaintop finish of this second week. It's not that 166 Ks flat at the start, 77 Ks of pretty much flat, which will make it difficult for a break to form. Jay Vine talks about break formation in the later interview on this episode. And then there's a 3K 13.5% climb, which in the middle of the stage with 66 Ks to go, which is just outrageous. I don't know. I'm so not used to that sort of parkour in the middle of the stage. I don't really know what's going to happen. And then it finishes with the 14.5K, 6.3% climb. I don't really know what to expect, Benji. Is that a place for INEOS to try something? Or Bahrain or Movistar? Kind of yes, to be honest, if they have riders in the break ahead, because there's rolling valley afterwards. I don't know. You test Roglic, see what it's like. If he responds, then you can just shut it down. This is what I think, Benji. You test Roglic on the middle climb. If you see something, then you continue your action, maybe with satellite riders up the road. If he looks good, don't pace him on the final climb, because then he's just going to 14K, 6%. That suits him, suits Haig. But yeah, I don't really know what to expect from this, to be honest.
Do you think that INEOS could try and get Carapaz in the breakaway and try and gain time in the second week on a stage like this? Because do you think that Jumbo will react to that if Carapaz goes?
I think
he's 11 minutes down.
They need him. You can't have Bernal closing his own gaps 3Ks into a climb and a mountaintop finish anymore. Carapaz needs to do that work, to be honest. I'd rather have Van Baarle, who else they got? Sivakov maybe in the break instead, to be honest. I think Carapaz needs to be riding defensively for Bernal and Yates in the final climb, in my view. But yeah, should be an interesting stage. We'll see if you get dropped on that steep climb and the descent afterwards, and you're not able to get back on, and the break and the peloton continues this action. There's a long valley there of 45, 50 kilometers where you can lose a lot of time before they even start the final climb. So yeah, it'd be interesting to watch that middle part of the stage. The last stage of the second week, stage 15, 198 kilometers long, another hard stage. We have 2 Cat 1s, a Cat 2. The first climb is 15K is 5%, then 9K is 5%, then 20.5K is at 5.5%. There's no valleys between those climbs.
I love this stage.
It's a great stage. And then there's like a short valley before an 8.6K 4% climb. So teammates here are very important. There's not a mountaintop finish. This is the stage, Benji, where you can use numbers, because it's not just a watts per kilo mountaintop finish, 9% finish.
Yeah, this reminds me of the reason why I like the Giro end stages so much, because usually in stage 20 or something, you've got a stage where the second last climb is the biggest one, and then you've got a smaller climb towards the finish line, or a bit of a valley section afterwards that falls flat to the line, stuff like that, which forces people who are on a bit of a gap, or gives them an opportunity to attack on the second last climb. And this 20.4 kilometer Puerto de Mijares is perfect for that. Yes, the gradients are not insane, but we've seen on the Stelvio that you don't need insane gradients. But then again, Stelvio is high altitude, so that is quite a different thing. Now, this is a stage where I do see moves happening, and I don't expect it necessarily on the first 2 climbs. I don't see a GC rider attacking on the first 2 climbs, but you can have satellite riders already in the group ahead, and then on the Puerto de Mijares, move with your GC rider. And it would not surprise me if everything goes down on Mijares here, and we've got a whole battle from Mijares to the finish line. And that would be a wonderful stage to see, and perhaps the Queen stage, because sure, we've got Camuniteru coming in week 3, for example, but that is a Angliru kind of stage where it's the final climb that matters the most, and most likely the last 2 kilometers will matter the most of that climb. And on this stage, you can have action for the last 40 kilometers, and that's why I prefer a stage like this over something like Camuniteru personally, because it allows more tactical play.
Honestly, I would. Carlos Verona just announced his contract extension with Movistar.
Really?
Just through 2023. We keep mentioning him. He came in with Vlasov, Aru, and Lopez at 3:48 yesterday, or only 2 minutes 40 behind Roglic on the mountaintop finish. He is climbing really well, and this is a shallower, longer gradient. This is perfect. Movistar, if they want to win the Vuelta and try something, this is the one to try. So hopefully we can begin it up, and even. Let's talk Contador. Benji mentioned the Giro. Get with strong climbers like a Vine or someone, and let's collaborate and maybe offer up stage victories as well. We can maybe see some of that if they catch guys in the break.
Be the offensive rider at Bahrain, knowing that Haig is the more defensive rider on paper, knowing his position?
That's a good call, because I think both Mader and Haig prefer like the 5 to 7% climbs in their wheelhouse, like these ones. So Mader's a good one. He's a good descender too. So yeah, I'd love to see something on this stage. But I think we're running out of time, Benji and I, or re-previewing the second stage. We'll get on now to our interview with Jay Vine, who, if you don't know, he won the Zwift Academy final last year, the end of last year in 2020. He's from Australia. I've met up with him in Australia before. It was weird. We met up when he was still running at Conti level in Australia, and I was just working as a lawyer. Now we're over in Europe, and we caught up in Andorra the other week. He's at the Vuelta now, his first World Tour race, I think, let alone Grand Tour. And we also speak a little bit about the move across to Europe, how that affected everything and what he expects from the rest of the Vuelta. So I hope you enjoy the interview with Jay. Very talented guy who's, I think, going to make some waves in the next couple of years. Welcome, Jay, from the Upson Phoenix team bus, escaping the hotel internet. Some of you, I've already introduced Jay, but the first thing I wanted to ask, not anything about his climbing, it's something I always wonder about, is he and James Knox, aka the climbing Tim de Klerk's, pulling flat breaks back, the 3 Spanish Pro Conti teams, keeping it at 90 seconds. How does that work with Knox? Do you say, okay, you do 10 minutes, I do 10 minutes? Is it shorter pulls? What do you also need to do to keep a break gap stable?
So I guess it depends from day to day. The last one that we did on stage 8, they tricked us a little bit. So we were pulling all day at about 300 watts on the front. I think we were averaging about 40 to 42 Ks an hour. And then in the final 50 Ks, as we started going over the bergs, they really started to dig a bit deeper, which after the sprint point, I was left on the front for a good 10 kilometers by myself, and the break gained an extra 20 seconds. But the bunch just has so much more speed in the downhills, like a phenomenal amount more speed in the downhill section. So we ended up closing that right up by the bottom of the downhill, and then as you saw on the TV, we turned left, I think, through a small town, and the GC team crushed that 40-second gap that they had in the space of about 500 meters.
Yeah, Astana were trying in that crosswind section.
Yeah, but yeah, I think like it's about 300 watts to keep the brake stable, and anything over 300 watts, it starts to come back down. When I was pulling with the Koenig and FDJ, we rotated about 2.5 Ks.
Okay.
So 2.5 K turns, and then you get 5 Ks rest, which ends up being about 6 or 7 minutes. So yeah, it's not crazy strenuous, but obviously compared to sitting in the bunch at 150 watts, it's double.
Is that something, because you're not like 55 kilos, you actually put out a large amount of absolute power. Is that something you've realized, actually I'm actually pretty good at this, because you are like 60, 68, 70 kilos, but also do you think it has a big effect on your ability to then say next day get in a break if there's a mountaintop finish, even though you say it's not the most strenuous in the world, but yeah, there is a cost to it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something I'm good at. I certainly wouldn't be doing it the day before trying to get in a big move, especially with a downhill start like we had on stage 9. That was a phenomenally hard and long.
Not televised.
Not televised. Yeah, I don't quite get that. It was flat out racing for the first 2 hours. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much out of me. I think it adds an extra 20 TSS to my whole overall day. But it's also nice to do it, not the day before, but a couple of days before you actually want to go on a big adventure, because it just provides a bit of load in the legs. Otherwise, you end up having 3 or 4 rest days and then trying to do all that effort. It's a bit rough on the legs. So, yeah.
And speaking of break establishment, let's go back to stage 7, which was fully televised on Friday, which was a really good stage. And one thing I noticed was, I feel like DSM went back to Tour de France 2020 DSM, where it's like, they're not going to try and chase every move. They're going to get multiple riders in the break, and they went late on the flatter section after the first climb. And I felt like that actually saved Storer and Co a lot. Whereas I look at Jack's power numbers, and you were right behind him at the end of that climb, I think, and he's done I don't know, 440 or something for that climb. And you and Tarame you're trying to establish that break. Do you think would does having a teammates like DSM help, where they got Nico Dens sort of pulling it back for them on the flat? They had Casper Pedersen last year. And do you think that cost you a little bit, that huge effort at the start, or was there time in the stage to recover before the final?
Absolutely. The start cost me a lot. But aside from that, like I was also pulling and with the 3-man group, I think on the flat section just before the top of the climb.
Oh, yeah.
So
with the Kaha guy.
Yeah. We semi got away and then got caught again by Jack's group and Sivakov over the top.
Yeah.
So there was a massive amount of wasted energy there. But also besides that, during the actual stage where it all started to kick off with 50 Ks to go, the DSM guys could then spread their load of, there's a snap attack at 600 watts for 20 seconds over this small little ridge in this Spanish town. Only 2 of them have to follow that, and then let the rest of the group react over the top, and they slowly come back to it on the downhill because they're obviously not going to work with it because they're trying to conserve their numbers throughout the entire day. So little things like that, obviously only having to do a third of the snap closes and real hard 500 watt 30-second surges through little villages will save your legs a lot in the end. I think I ended up with nearly 23 minutes over 550 watts for that day. I mean, the stage was only 4 hours 10.
Yeah, it was a shortish stage.
Yeah, so like all those little bits of energy, yeah, definitely count.
Yeah, he's a really good stage designer. It reminded me of that Basque Country stage, actually, which would be a good race for you to go to. And we didn't really see you in the early stage races this year. I mean, maybe explain to people how that worked out. I've just experienced it. I just know it myself, how disruptive it is. You know, Australia, in case people don't know, it's actually far away from Europe. So it's a big move to move over to Europe. Maybe explain to people like how that process worked for you and your family, and the timing of it as well, because you were almost straight into Tour of Turkey.
Yeah. The whole Zwift Academy really did come at the very last moment of the year. Basically 2 days before Christmas when I actually officially won the competition. So I wasn't able to start my visa process until February. And the Spanish like to take their time. So with all the requirements that weren't actually illustrated on their website, on their consular website, and with all the translations and apostling that I had to do, I ended up not actually physically getting to Europe until the start of March. On top of that, I had to do the first move all the way over here by myself. I wasn't able to bring Brie over because we were still waiting on her paperwork. To top it all off, you still have to get the permission from the Australian government to leave the country at the moment. So we got here about the start of March, and the team already had all their riders selected for the upcoming races. So Catalunya, as much as people think that I was going to do that race, wasn't on the list. Paris-Nice and Tirreno obviously already had their squads sort of down, and I think there was a dropout of Turkey. That's why I ended up getting that spot as well. So not being involved at the start of the season did sort of take away a bunch of those opportunities, those races that really do suit me. But it also gave me the opportunity to perform at a lower sort of obscure race that is still pro level, you almost to say.
Yeah.
But that won't be an issue this time because I won't be going home. Australia has made that a bit too difficult to do this year.
I accepted as well. We spoke the other day about spending Christmas in Europe. Like, it's not even the quarantine back there. It's I got to get back here to work, and so do you. Like that's the problem. So an ideal schedule for you probably would be something like Paris, or Catalonia, Basque Country, etc. What have
Probably
you?
like the old
Oh, sorry, go on.
saying schedule with your Andalusia at the start where it's supposed to be in the year, then a Catalunya, a Basque, something like that, like the Spanish type warm-ups, because I think we'd still end up sending Vanderpool to Torino or Paris-Nice, and then because Vanderpool would probably do Torino still because he's going to be doing the Italian trifecta of Strada, Torino, then probably a Milan.
Yeah.
And then the classics guys would probably do a Paris-Nice, and then do opening weekend. So keeping me in the Spanish part of the globe would probably make more sense. But once again, I'm not the sports director.
Yeah. And so what have you learned the most this year from, like, now you've actually had a consistent block of European World Tour? Burgos not World Tour, but you're racing against World Tour guys on the climbs. What have you learned now with maybe this year compared to, say, I guess you had Sun Tour and then no racing just about in Australia in 2020?
Yeah. Probably the biggest thing is there is, it's going to sound cliche and lots of people have said it, but the level, there isn't the crazy big gaps at this level anymore. Like in Australia, I could basically just do what I wanted in a race and still possibly win. But here, you've got to try and find every 1% that you can to save your legs for the end. And trying to you can lean on riders to do things that aren't in their interest, to get an advantage as well. So there's little nuances like that I'm slowly learning. I've learned that I may not have won on stage 7, but I could certainly have saved more energy and possibly finished with Kuss and Haig if I'd lent on them more throughout the stage. I probably still wouldn't have made the move with Sivakov, but I would have been there with Kuss and Haig in the end had I played my cards a bit better. But there's stuff like that you can't learn at the pro level because you don't get breaks like that, and that class of rider racing flat out at lower levels.
Well, that's the thing. You got that break. You've pretty much got a top 5 GC guy in Haig who showed that yesterday in the break, and it's like, well, he's at that level where I feel like he and Großschartner, you could be like, you and Felix should pull because you got red jersey ambitions, not on me. And I was actually surprised Großschartner didn't take it up a little bit earlier because he only lost red by 8 seconds.
Just a thing on that. We did chat afterwards. He was wanting to pull. His team was telling him to hold off.
Wait, what?
But, yeah, exactly.
What, for the imaginary Shackman up the road with Verona?
I don't quite know the logic behind it, but he missed out on the jersey by 8 seconds. He was definitely riding for that jersey.
I know. He said it in Instagram afterwards. He was so disappointed.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then he lost like 3-4 minutes yesterday. GC done that. Wow, that's a real shame. I'm surprised by that because once Verona bridged, it was done. The stage was done. At that point, you had to go for GC. What rider outside the GC picture, just a random rider that we might not know, has impressed you the most this Vuelta? We like that guy is really strong, or alternatively really smart, making the right moves, and you're like, that's someone who I can learn from, or someone that the public doesn't realize is actually a hitter?
Probably Craddock's ride on stage 7.
True.
I did not see him at the front of the bunch, the front of the moves. He was suffering on every climb, and then manages to get away when it counted towards the end after we were all screwed attacking each other and following. And it actually took a lot of effort for Stora to bridge across to Craddock when he did go. So, I think Craddock is pretty underrated. The finish didn't suit him at all.
Yeah.
But I think he'll have his eye on stage 11. 'Cause I think that's a lot easier stage, and with that flat finish, I think he can make something of it.
Speaking of stages to come, have you stage that the next week doesn't look that great for you really? There's stage 15, which has got the final climb. I mean, stage 15 has got some long climbs in it, long steady climbs. There's a question mark over whether the break will win. What stages have you got bookmarked is in the next week, if any, or are you just going to wait for the proper high mountain ones in the third week?
Basically, I've got 2 stages bookmarked, stage 11 and stage 15, like you said. Stage 11, mainly because it's not super hard enough really for the GC guys to make an impact, and I guess the only sprinter possibly looking at doing something on that stage might be Michael Matthews.
Yeah.
But with stage 15, it really depends on the start. Like, we've got, I think, 20 Ks, 25 Ks of flattish, slight uphill roads to start with. So if it's really tough and really brutal to get in the break, I'm probably not going to bother. I'm going to save all my energy for the third week. Like you said, the stages, the way they start, don't really suit me, and they're all massive roads as well. So, you know, it's not like you can let 5 or 10 guys go up the road and then block it. It doesn't seem to be very Giro-esque where, you know, they're letting 10 guys go and then just blocking the road. There's an almighty fight for dozens of kilometers. So yeah, no, I'll play it by an ear. See how the first 10 or 20 Ks go in these stages, but otherwise I'll be waiting for the third week.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that stage 11, I don't think the way Jumbo are looking, like obviously Roglic can win that stage, but they're just showing little interest in burning their whole team pacing all day, which I think is fair enough. The question mark is whether, I don't know, like I think it's got, the official profile says 800-meter punch. I think, yeah, I mean, it depends who's in the break. If Magnus Cort and Matthews are in the move, you know, Magnus Cort's in the move, you'd probably be like, oh, that's not exactly great for me. But yeah, I think, as you said, play it by ear. It's like the Tour de France second week. They had no mountaintop finishes in the second week of the Tour de France.
Yeah.
It was a bit weird. Anyway, thanks for coming on, Jay. We'll watch out for you probably on stages 17 and 18. My last question was, are you backing yourself out of the GC group? I think Dan Martin tried to do it on one of the mountain stages in the Tour de France where you're like, okay, the break's not forming, but we've got a mountaintop finish, but I'm so far down on GC, but if I attack and no one's really pacing, no one's going to chase me down. Is that something you're thinking about, or is it only winning out of the break?
I mean, it's definitely possible, especially with next week having some hard days towards the end. And if I've literally done nothing for the first 4 or 5 days, then yeah, it could be a possibility. But I certainly won't be trying that after any sort of load in my legs, because they're just a bit too fast for me at the moment.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean,
first World Tour race here.
First, I'm just going, why can't you just beat Roglic on mountaintop finish? It's not that hard, man.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for coming on, Jay. Best of luck with the next couple of weeks of the Vuelta, and I'm sure we'll see you hopefully maybe racing some Italian one days afterwards. I haven't really discussed it with you, but hopefully. Thanks for Jay for making the time on his rest day in the morning, early wake up for him. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Make sure you follow him on Instagram or Twitter. He's regularly posting updates on how he's going during the race and what he's learning. And give a like down below if you enjoyed the interview. Otherwise, Benji, last thoughts on this second week. Who do you expect to be 1, 2, 3 in GC on the second rest day?
I think Roglic first, Mas second, and Hagenfeld based
Correct.
on the current. Correct. It's like it's a test. Did I get full score here?
I just think because Mal is going to be made to work, like not work, but like Mal's the one closing gaps. Mal's the one, okay, well, if someone needs to attack, it's Lopez, I think, and Hay can ride 100% for himself. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that's how it's going to go. Otherwise, I think it could be some break wins, but I think hopefully a little bit more of an exciting parcours than the Tour de France second week. But we hope you enjoyed the rest day recap podcast. We always enjoy doing these, and we'll let you get on with your day. Till tomorrow, ciao.